Hello there and welcome to JJ Painting. I am JJ and we're going to dive straight into today's video today. So as many of you may have seen the Graham Norton interview with Henry Cavill on the 3rd of December 2021, and obviously the Warhammer hobby came up on that show. Whilst it's very clear that Graham Norton didn't entirely understand it, he definitely said a few things that Henry Cavill didn't agree with, that I didn't agree with, and I'm sure most of you who watched it didn't agree with either. But ultimately I think it did raise a question, especially the way Henry Cavill talked about it himself, is that the hobby is something that a lot of people are involved with, and it's something which a lot of people really enjoy and really love. And I think it's a very telling as well that not that many people know about it. And I think that's partly to do with us, but that's also to do with other factors as well. And I think it's fair to say that even in the minds of most of us, like you and like myself, of people who've been in the hobby for a long time, it is something which you only really talk about with your fellow Warhammer friends, really. You don't talk about it that openly, you don't share it. But I think that's something which we should change collectively. We as a community should think about it more openly, be more willing to share it, and be proud of it, because it is a good thing, and it's something which we all take an enormous amount of pleasure in taking part in. So I want to start this video by saying this is something we should all be proud of, and this is something we should all celebrate. And even though I am going to largely be talking about Games Workshop and Warhammer, I do of course extend this to things such as Malifaux, to Warmer Hordes, to the new Star Wars games, to Drop Zone Commander, to all the other tabletop games that have been out there, and obviously D&D, and all the other tabletop games that have been around for absolutely decades. And whilst I will be crediting Games Workshop with a lot of things, I do want to make it clear now that none of this would have been possible without you, the community, without us doing this together, without our collective love, without our collective support, and without us engaging with it and wanting to see it succeed and wanting it to be the best hobby it can be. Then it would have gone away years ago, and there are people who would have never found out about it and never have had their lives enriched by it. And I know that may sound quite bold, but it's true. People are happier for it, and that's something which we don't acknowledge that much. But today, and in this video, we are, because I want us to talk about the hobby differently, and I want all of you to talk about it differently. I want it to be something, like I said, for us to be proud of. And today, I'm very proud to be painting this model right here. So let's talk about the Warhammer community and why we should be proud of it. Alright, let's get straight into this. The first thing to be proud of is Games Workshop and Warhammer's longevity without needing huge mainstream success. You got to remember that Games Workshop is actually older than the Czech Republic, and the fact that it's lasted so long is not only noteworthy, but frankly amazing when you consider what kind of company it is. It is a miniatures company. There have been banks, there have been design brands, there have been huge companies that have come and gone in the time that Games Workshop has existed. And whilst Games Workshop has definitely had its wobbles, the fact that it has lasted this long, not only surviving, but also thriving, is a massive thing that's worth celebrating. And to be fair to everyone in this community, and everyone who plays Warhammer, they've helped contribute to that for sure. Yes, there are things that have made Games Workshop look like it was going to wobble throughout the years, the aftermath of The Lord of the Rings being one of them, but the fact that they're still here, like I said, is a big deal. And the fact they've gone from strength to strength and have grown not just their brand, but they've also grown their range and their own lore is also really quite a big deal and very impressive. And this brings me on to my second point, and that's the fact it has created two, arguably three, unique sci-fi / fantasy series that have gained a life of their own and have become more than just background fluff. I am of course talking about the Black Library novels have been an enormous contribution to this as well, and that's something else to consider, but we'll get to that in a moment. The fact that the background ideas of the Horus Heresy and the Sabbath Worlds Crusade and the End Times and Archaon and the old ones and the Empire within the fantasy universe are more than just background fluff. They've grown, they've developed. There are novels, there are comics, there are graphic novels, there are video games dedicated to this background history, all based off the background lore of a tabletop game. When you look at similar sci-fi or fantasy things such as Star Wars or The Lord of the Rings, they all very much started with movies and books, as did the Discworld, even as did Dune. None of them started from the same place that Games Workshop did. Arguably, the closest comparison is Transformers, because that started with toys before the TV show. But let's be fair here, Transformers definitely has not had the attention to detail in the storytelling that things like the Horus Heresy has, for example. But that's just another thing to bear in mind, and something else to be proud of, the fact that thanks to everyone being so involved and so engaged, Games Workshop has said, our story deserves to have some attention, it deserves to have some detail, and it should be treated as an essential part of the gaming experience, not just added fluff for people to look at in their off hours. And this brings me on to my next point, is that Games Workshop has brought a lot of people together. the community around Warhammer is more than just an online community. It's a physical community in the Warhammer stores. It's a community in local gaming groups and the massive gaming clubs as well, that throw everything from beginner lessons to people who want to learn to play the game to tournaments and international ranked leaderboards that we've started to see come around in the last couple of years. These are all incredible things, and these are also things that you got to remember don't really exist in other mediums. Yes, you have things like esports for video games, but a lot of that is remote and a lot of that is online. It's very rare that you actually meet the people who you're playing against unless you already know them. And this is one of the great strengths of the community, and this is something else which is why we should all take pride in it, is that I personally have met many great people through it. I recently played in a league in the local store that I go to, and I had some fantastic games, and I met some truly wonderful people whilst I was doing that. But I wouldn't have met these people who I now call friends without Games Workshop, without Warhammer to bring us all together. And because of that as well, you've got to remember that this is something else which is worth celebrating in and of itself, like I say. And to conclude on this point, as a personal note, I had an estranged family member that came back into my life a few years ago, and we really did blend over Age of Sigmar. Now, however you feel about Age of Sigmar, leave that to one side, but we got together, we got to learn the game, both in 2nd edition and 3rd edition of Age of Sigmar. We built up our armies relatively at the same time, even though I did play fantasy before and he didn't. But we got to know each other through that, and it really helped bring us together. So to conclude on the Warhammer community side of things for a second, not only does it bring people together, you could even argue it brings families together. And I do know siblings that have grown up playing it, and that's something else which is worth remembering. And some of the longest friendships I've had in my life, I've gotten through Warhammer. And without it, I wouldn't have had them. So on a personal note, I'd say I've benefited hugely from having that community. Whilst we're on the topic of the community, I do also actually want to say quickly how fantastic it has been to see the community online. Obviously, wherever you go, whether it's Facebook, Reddit, or Instagram, there is always a massive amount of Warhammer content, people sharing their painting, articles about the Meta Watch, even things where people just write their opinions down, and even the rumours that come around occasionally have all been fantastic contributions to our community. But then there's also the other side of that, where we see people who live stream their painting, online battle reports, and the YouTube channels such as Mini War Games, Auspex Tactics, Tabletop Infiltrator, just to name a few, and a couple of ones that I've got to know since I got on YouTube as well, such as Dice Saga, who I've mentioned before, and Kerry over at K-Legs, who runs the Road 2 series. Incidentally, hi guys, hope you're all well. But it's also that fantastic passion and that excitement around the hobby which makes these things possible and gives these guys traction. And it's worth mentioning that a lot of these channels have all been extraordinarily successful to the point that they're monetized, they have sponsors, they're doing really, really well unto themselves. And that's something else which I think we should all be proud of, is the number of people that have benefited and been able to launch businesses off the back of this hobby that has given them their own business, their own agency, and an entrepreneurial spirit that they otherwise may not necessarily have had. And of course, there's big companies such as KR Cases and Tabletop Tyrant that have been able to produce alternative ways to transport your models, and other companies such as Seed Studios that obviously are a commissioned painting service. The fact that these organizations and these companies exist is a fantastic thing, and I wanted to mention it quickly here now. And just to very quickly surmise on the fact that the online community has helped spread the hobby as well, so more people have easier access to information. People share tips on how to play the game, how to paint their models, and it's done a lot to help promote people into the hobby and give people a new approach to the hobby and help them learn more about it in a way they probably wouldn't have been able to. And again, on a personal note, when I started in the hobby, the online side of things was much reduced and didn't exist in the same way, but it's a very positive experience for the most part, and it is actually there to help people, and I think that's worth mentioning and definitely worth celebrating. Something else I want to say as a very basic but very obvious thing is that it brings joy to people. And that's something which I think is worth celebrating. I mean, not every aspect of Games Workshop and Warhammer has brought joy to us, mentioning no fine casts, I mean names. But on the whole, I think it is worth mentioning that it does bring joy. It does bring excitement, and I'm sure we've all had that urge and that rush when there's a new release or we see a model that we like. We go out, we buy it, we build it, and then we have no idea what to do with it, so it stays on our shelves for months before we do get around to painting it. That is something which, whilst expensive, is a good thing. It's good to have something that does bring joy. It's good to get enthusiastic and get excited about something, even if it is plastic, even if it is in a million pieces, even if you don't get around to painting it for a while. That's absolutely fine. It's good to have joy in your life, and it's good to have these things around us. So we should be proud that we have something that makes us, for want of a better word, so happy. And even when you do paint it and you do play games with it, there's nothing more satisfying than seeing your army fully painted on the tabletop, and nothing even more satisfying than seeing that army doing well or going down in a blaze of glory. Those are things that do bring joy, and I really want to emphasize that this is something which we should be proud of, that we have this as a community, and it's something that, again, we can share with each other. And then I want to just move on from this point as well and say that there are two other aspects to this that we should be proud of. Warhammer has made thousands of people think tactically and strategically through their games. And yes, you can argue that you can do this with things such as Age of Empires or the Total War series, which incidentally we'll get to in a second. But the fact is that it's a tabletop instant game. You're not just playing against an AI or against an opponent you can't see. You're playing against someone. You're able to talk things through, discuss things, test strategies, and do things with someone and see the reactions to that in person. It gives you a far more personal connection, if we go back to that community thing there, than you would do if you were doing it electronically. And on top of that, because the rules change, because armies change, because models change, because we change as people, our games are always evolving and they're always adapting. I'm not playing with the same models that I was in 2009, but then again, I'm not the same person that I was in 2009, and neither is the game. But then this brings me on to my next point, about the models rather than the game. Games Workshop has made tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people around the world artists. Now, I'm not talking about being a Golden Demon winning painter. I'm not talking about winning every painting competition you enter. You can just do a basic dry brush and a shade, and that's it. And in my eyes, you would still be an artist, and I've said this before. And that's something else to be proud of, because how many people out there who paint Warhammer miniatures would ever even think to pick up a paintbrush and some paints and just sit down for an afternoon and do some painting? Would they know that much about shading or highlighting, to get onto a technical note here? Would they know about colour theory if we want to get really technical? But would they find that kind of relaxation, that joy, maybe even that frustration, or even that determination to get better, to become the best artists they can be, to paint the models that they like because they want to make them the best they possibly can? That's something else I think we should all be proud of. But without this, I wouldn't have that, but I also wouldn't have the sense of calm and the sense of relaxation that I do from doing this every day. And I know that other people out there feel it, and even if you only get an hour or so to paint a week, that hour, I imagine, is very constructive and very relaxing, and I hope it's something that you always feel like you get a lot out of, both in terms of how you feel afterwards from a mental health perspective, but also from a productivity perspective, knowing that that hour was spent doing something constructive and something that you have tangibly to show to people afterwards. And then again, I'd also like to go back to the fact that this community is a wonderful place to share. If you want to improve your painting, there's plenty of resources out there to help you improve your painting, and if you just want people to just support you because you're not sure how it looks, then it's also good for that as well. So just to quickly sum up the huge amount of topics we've covered so far, GW has lasted a very, very long time. It's made people into artists and strategic thinkers. It's brought thousands of people together over a very exciting sci-fi series and a very exciting fantasy series with a very interesting lore and a very interesting history that people can read novels about, find out more about the character, the texture, the feel of those universes. And then, of course, it's turned those people into artists, allowing them to express how they feel about that universe in their own medium. It's given people a lot of scope to be creative in their own way. And I want to just add on to this by saying two more things that we should be proud of. First of all, I said earlier, it's not just survived, it's thrived. And we've seen this in multiple different formats. There have been successes like some of the Games Workshop video games, and whilst they have been mixed overall, I think it's fair to say, there have been some absolute triumphs out there. And I do, of course, mean things such as Space Marine, Dawn of War, the Total War series, which have all been fantastic and have represented the tabletop game incredibly well and have been incredibly well received by the community. There's also been a film, the Ultramarine movie, if you remember that. I mean, bless it, it may or may not have been to your taste, but it happened. But the fact is that whilst these things did happen, and whilst not everything has been a success in that respect, where it has been a success, it's become a core part of the language of Warhammer, I'd say. And without those successes, I'd say that the hobby would still be there, but it would still be less. But it's nice to see that the Games Workshop and Warhammer have done these things. They've shown that they can move from one medium to another. And not only can they move from one medium to another in some success, but also where they have done it, they've done it right, and everyone knows that they've done it right, and it's something to be enjoyed not just by people in the hobby, but it also brings more people into the hobby. And this brings on to my last 2 points about Warhammer and why we should be proud of it. First of all, Warhammer and Games Workshop have done a very, very good job moving with the times. Now, ultimately, diversity was always going to be something that comes into absolutely every aspect of our lives because it should be represented and it should be celebrated and it should be enjoyed, not the least in a galaxy-spanning story in the 40k universe or in the multiple realms of Age of Sigmar, but in a very more, how shall we say, specific way that Games Workshop have done it. If there was one company that no one really expected to do it, or really was going to be pressured into do it, it was Games Workshop. They ultimately could have just ignored it, I feel, and carried on the way they were. Yes, they would have had to make the change eventually, but they were under no pressure to do it. The same way that other companies that I won't name very much seemed to feel like they were pressured to make those diversity changes and almost feel like they begrudgingly, resentfully did it out of an obligation. GW is doing it in a slightly more authentic way, in a way of saying, yes, Warhammer is for everyone, and therefore everyone should be included and visible in it. And then this brings me on to my last point, a very recent point in fact, and that is Games Workshop's stance, very specifically that Warhammer is for everyone. And if you've seen their article on Warhammer community website, that's something else which is quite important to remember. They've made a very clear point. They're saying Warhammer is for everyone. There is no exclusive club. There should be no gatekeepers. If you want to be a part of this community, you will be a part of this community, provided that you respect and, to a degree, celebrate everyone else that's in it. It's a very, very important part of it, and that's something which Games Workshop have made very clear as well. And ultimately, that stance is something which, yes, whilst a company is past a certain size, so you'd expect it to do that, is the fact that they did it with such strength, and they've done it quite frequently in terms of their Warhammer is for everyone message, that is quite respectable. So to conclude on this video, we have ourselves a company that has been around for a long time, like I said, has brought joy to people, has engaged with its community. Its community has grown, it has thrived, it has tried things, it has pushed the boat out, and it has allowed itself to become bigger than potentially what anyone who first started it thought it could be. And that is to be celebrated. And whilst, yes, not everything Games Workshop has done has been a success, and not everyone's agreed with absolutely everything they've done, in the last 5 to 10 years at the very least, I'd say, and I've seen this change, I've seen this development myself, is that the changes and the developments, both in terms of the store, in terms of the community, have been a huge step forwards. And I remember a time where people were leaving the hobby quite quickly, but that time I feel is over. I think there are more people coming into it now than there has been in my lifetime for sure, and that's an exciting thing. There's more talent, there's more enthusiasm, there's more interesting things going on. People read the rules differently, the games are different, the community is different, it's growing, and it's growing in a positive direction. And I think there's this feeling around Warhammer as well and Games Workshop that it's something which, if you like it, you have to hide it, or if you like it, you only talk about it with your Warhammer friends. I think that needs to stop, and that needs to stop now, because we should be proud of it. This is something we should say, we do this, we are proud of doing this. It has made us happy, it has made us artists, it has made us meet people we otherwise probably never would meet. We've become a community because of it. And that's to be celebrated, and you are to be celebrated. And I hope you remember that when we get to the end of this rather long video. But I hope you know that everyone who's in this community is valued and is important. So altogether, we should all say it, we are proud of playing Warhammer. And as always, I leave it over to you. I hope you are proud of being part of this community. I am proud to know that you are part of this community, and I hope you share these things with me as well. Let me know what you're proud about in this community in the comments below. I look forward to hearing from you all. There we are. That is why I think we should be proud of the Warhammer community, and why we should be proud of all of our tabletop hobbies, not just Warhammer, but also the other ones I mentioned at the beginning of this video. And like I said at the beginning of this video, there is a lot there that has done so much for so many people, and it has made so many people happy, and so many people take so much pride and joy in what they do, that all of us together collectively have created something which is fantastic. GW obviously facilitated our ability to come together as a community, but ultimately without us there wouldn't be one, so we should be proud of what we've achieved. Most of it's positive, and that's the good thing about it. That's something we should all hold on to. The fact it is such a positive and constructive environment, and that so many people have benefited from it. And I really hope that you will take from this video the way I feel about it, that we can continue this, and I hope it continues on long into the future so that we can share it with more people will get enthusiastic about it, and we will continue to grow as a community and as a hobby. And I want to thank you all very, very much for watching. So for all of you out there, keep painting your models, keep flipping your cards, keep rolling those dice, keep involved. Goodbye, have a lovely day, and hopefully I'll see you at the gaming club one day.